My friends, Ukraine just witnessed a disaster near Pokrovsk. An entire armored column got obliterated. It's really bad. Dozens of armored vehicles destroyed or abandoned. But you won't hear about it in the mainstream media. I think it's the first time since the Kursk offensive that I saw something that bad. Perhaps even since the 2023 summer offensive. It happened right here north of Pokrovsk, along the TO515 road linking Rodinske to Pokrovsk. Here's the entire video. A real steel graveyard with some of the AFU's most iconic vehicles just destroyed. If you pay attention, it's actually much worse than that because there are also a number of pickup trucks that have been destroyed further to the rear. This is absolutely insane. For the OGs that have been following the Ukraine war for a while, this reminds me of the Road of Death from Bakhmut. But it's actually much worse than that because of the precision of all these drones. So let's analyze what happened in detail. First of all, let's list all the vehicles that have been destroyed. So we have the US-made Max Pro MRAP, actually two Max Pro MRAPs and a US-made M113 APC. There's also possibly a Striker, not really sure. Two Turkish-made Kirpis. We also have a Swedish-made BVS-10. It's this two-piece articulated armored vehicle. I can also see one Canadian Russell Senator. And then we also have a bunch of Ukrainian-made vehicles. Two UAT Gyorza 01, a BTR-4E, and two Novator 2s. And then we can also see the burnt down remains of three unidentified armored vehicles. That's 15 vehicles plus that pickup truck at the rear, 16 units that I can visually confirm, but other sources mention 22 wrecks of Ukrainian vehicles visible in that sector. What a disaster, really. 15, 16, or 22. It's really bad. This is what the war of attrition actually looks like. Now the tragedy for Ukraine is that it won't be able to retrieve any of these vehicles. Those are all complete write-offs. This is particularly catastrophic for units that are already running low on armored vehicles. However, this steel graveyard didn't happen at once, and this is probably why you didn't hear about it. This is actually the result of weeks of fighting. Those vehicles have all been destroyed between September and October 2025. And now, pay attention, it's not near the front line either. Like I said, the war of attrition, just weeks of resupplies and rotations hit by Russian drones. This is how it's done nowadays in Ukraine. When you're so close to the contact line, the zero line like the Ukrainians say, you won't see actual supply trucks or vehicles bringing reinforcements. It's all done via these infantry fighting vehicles, APCs, MRAPs. Put simply, it's like armored taxis. No joke, it's the Uberization of war. Rotations typically involve one fire team or squad at a time, and these soldiers bring all the supplies they need for 3 to 4 days. Ammunition, water, food, before being replaced by another team that also has all the supplies with them. So as a scale of magnitude, for example, the famous US-made Max Pro MRAP can carry up to 6 troops. The Ukrainian-made Novator 2 can carry 8 to 10 soldiers, the Turkish Kirpi 10 to 13, and the Canadian-made Russell Senator up to 10 men. But that's in theory because with all the gear and the supplies, the real transport capacity is much lower, maybe half, so still a fire team for each vehicle. But yeah, when the Ukrainians lose such vehicles, rotations will take many more days. A year and a half ago, we were talking about 3-day rotations. But if you lose vehicles and because of all the drones, this 3-day has become 5 to 6, maybe even 2 to 3 weeks. This has made resupplying frontline units much more complicated. Oftentimes, the soldiers sitting in frontline trenches have to get resupplied by drone drops. And because of the limited carrying capacity of these drones, it takes forever. It's one trip after another. Losing vehicles and drones also makes medevacs much more difficult. As a result, many squads are just ordered to do everything by foot. Now, because of all these material losses, some units have no other choice but to rent the vehicles from other formations. So yeah, back to the steel graveyard. The website Lost Armor shows the confirmed drone strike for each of the vehicles that were destroyed. What's very interesting is that on the map we can see that it's in this direction that most of these vehicles were heading. Southeast, meaning across open fields near this farm towards Mirnohrad. So they were not going to Pokrovsk, which is on the western side of the road. More specifically, this happened about 3 kilometers away from the first buildings of Mirnohrad. So it's really this intersection that is a K-zone where all the vehicles have to go through and that is completely exposed. Now, apparently, these vehicles that were destroyed or abandoned belong to several Ukrainian units like the 38th Marine Brigade, the 14th National Guard Brigade Chervona Kalina, the 425th Assault Regiment Skala, very famous unit, and the 79th Air Assault Brigade. If you've been following the Ukraine war for a while, you'll know that these are elite formations. I say elite because they're not filled to the brim with mobilized personnel with little training like for other Ukrainian brigades. These ones managed to keep a decent pool of veterans, and because of their elite status, they also managed to attract a good number of volunteers as well. The few that Ukraine still gets to this day obviously prefer to go to elite units. Now, to be honest, if we cope a little bit, most of the vehicles that were destroyed are light vehicles. Yes, there was an M113 APC, a BTR-4E that were abandoned, maybe even a Striker, but from what we can see, it's still largely MRAPs and pickup trucks. And honestly, this is bound to happen, especially when cauldrons are tightening and supply lines eventually get exposed to enemy fire, or in this case, to enemy Chinese-made toys. All this to say that many of these vehicles are relatively easy to replace. So according to the data I have in front of me, generally speaking, the UAT Gyurza 01, we're talking about 500 units being produced per year in Ukraine. As for the Novator 2, estimates mention 600 units to be produced in 2025. But as you can notice, in that steel graveyard, there's no tanks, no Leopard 2 T-64, or valuable IFVs like the M2A2 Bradley. And also, this wasn't the result of a botched assault on Russian positions, like during the 2023 summer offensive. It's simple resupply convoys that got ambushed. When you're inside one of these vehicles, you know that you have to cross this area at all speed. But if you're unlucky, you pick the wrong number, you're the one that's gonna get hit by an enemy drone. Most Ukrainian vehicles will, of course, be equipped with electronic warfare equipment, signal jammers, but there's no defense against fiber optic drones, apart from shotguns. Oh yeah, there's also an interesting observation. You'll notice that in the video, the vehicles face all directions. This means they were struck both during the outbound and inbound trip. I'm giving you these details so you understand how difficult it is nowadays to just resupply soldiers at the front, to rotate them out. But when we look at the steel graveyard, there's another interesting observation we can make. We see that it's actually the village of Hrishine that acts as supply hub for the Pokrovsk Mirnohrad direction. So from this village of Hrishine, Rodinske Pokrovsk are relatively easy to reach, but Mirnohrad is much further away. It's much deeper in the cauldron and they have no other choice but to pass through this deadly intersection. From Hrishine to Mirnohrad, it's 12 kilometers. A vehicle loaded up at full capacity with soldiers and supplies can cross that in 12 to 18 minutes, depending on the weather, depending on the road. And that's one way. It's very long considering all the enemy drones that are active in that sector. Then you're barely allowed to stop for everyone to disembark, for the new team to jump in, and for you to press the gas pedal to go back. As you can imagine, every journey has to be perfectly timed and coordinated. Now, there's this Polish Twitter account called Thorkill, and he studied this very specific sector with great attention. So I wanted to share what he wrote with you. On the 21st of September, he already claimed that this specific intersection with all the destroyed vehicles most likely changed hands several times already, due to attacks by the Russian 5th and 9th Motorized Rifle Brigades. Maybe, that's what he claims, but I cannot confirm it due to the lack of geolocations of Russian forces in that sector. No flag raisers, for example, or even Ukrainian drone strikes on Russian infantry in that area. So, generally speaking, I get what he means, but it's still to be determined. But then, check this out. He mentions a video posted by Ukraine's Skala regiment on the 4th of September about combat actions right in that sector of the steel graveyard. First of all, he says the video is old, which makes sense to maintain OPSEC. These brigades will not live stream their assault, So it must have happened sometime in August. And that Polish Twitter account says that at 23 minutes 55 of that video, another Ukrainian soldier candidly admits, "Ma'am, it's always been tough, But like, it got really tough, well, about a month ago, give or take. They're blocking logistics by bypassing Pokrovsk and having the ability to cut off our logistics. That must have been the situation in early August already. So imagine the situation now, in October. If we look on Deep State UA, this is the current situation of the front line north of Pokrovsk around Rodinske. And a reminder that what Deep State UA reports is the best case scenario for Ukraine. In reality, Russian forces have probably gained much more ground. It's an important disclaimer because this was the front line near Rodinske on September 1st, and this is the situation now. It barely changed. Despite the heavy fighting in that area and these anecdotal stories of Ukrainian soldiers saying the enemy is blocking the logistics. According to many mappers, the armed forces of Ukraine have already lost control of Krasny Liman and the eastern half of Rodinske as well. Like I said many months ago, the Battle of Rodinske will determine the Battle of Pokrovsk. If Rodinske falls, supplying Pokrovsk and Mirnorhad will become extremely difficult. Actually, it will be impossible to resupply Mirnorhad. It's too far deep in the cauldron. So it's possible that the Ukrainians eventually abandon Mirnorhad and fall back on Pokrovsk. So if Rodinske falls, it's just a matter of time before Mirnorhad falls. The key settlement that Ukraine cannot afford to lose at the moment is the one we just mentioned earlier, Khryshine. Khryshine is from where supplies are dispatched for the entire Pokrovsk front. If Khryshine falls, it's GG well played. Anyway, that's all I have for you today. See you in the next one.